We are, as religious people might put it, children under God and responsible one for the other. Now, why do you rebel? What's wrong with this philosophy?
But that is what, in fact, makes man a sacrificial animal. I say that man is entitled to his own happiness and that he must achieve it himself, but that he cannot demand that others give up their lives to make him happy. I hold that men should have self-esteem.
Who are you, Ayn Rand? When I say that, I would like to know just a little bit of your vital statistics. You have an accent which is...
Russian.
Russian. You were born in Russia?
Yes. February 2nd, 1905. Petrograd, Russia. At that time it was called St. Petersburg, which is Leningrad now. It used to be the largest city in Russia at the time. It's comparatively considered not very old by European standards because it dates only from the 18th century. There's two sisters younger than myself, that is, there were three daughters altogether. I was the oldest, and then there were two younger girls. They were exactly 2.5-year intervals, that is, the second sister was 2.5 years younger than I, and the youngest 5 years. That would be my father. He was a self-made man, and he owned a small business, which he had created himself, and that is rather unusual for Russia. By the time I was born, he was already quite well off. I wouldn't call it unusually wealthy, but I would call it middle to upper middle class financially. He had achieved it all himself and had besides sent his 6 sisters through college, plus a younger brother. He had 6 sisters and 2 brothers. He was a man who held ideals which I didn't discover till I was 15. Very strong ideals, a man of very firm conviction, but you'd never know it. He would be predominantly silent, argued very little. He was one of the most conscientious persons about his work, and that I have heard from colleagues and other people. He apparently was very good at it. And strangely enough, I learned later that what he would have wanted to do was to be a writer. But I liked him as a person. Only in childhood, I had very little to do with him. It's after we began to be political allies that I really felt a real love for him. I probably loved him even then much more than mother. I'll say frankly, it's a slightly painful subject in one respect only. She was so wonderful in being instrumental in sending me to America that I feel unfair in saying anything critical. So anything I say, can I say it under the preface that I appreciate what she did enormously. During my childhood, I disliked her quite a lot. We really did not get along. My big clashes with mother in childhood were the fact that I was antisocial, as she would call it. She always demanded that I be more interested in other children. Why didn't I like to play with others? Why didn't I have any girlfriends? That was kind of the nagging refrain. I also knew that she disapproved of me in every respect except one. She was very proud of my intelligence. She was very proud to show me off to the rest of the family. I was very aware that there was a definite rivalry between her and her sister's husband, who was a rival with mother about the accomplishments of their children. It was too obvious and slightly embarrassing that I obviously was the most brilliant of the 6 by every kind of standard, and this uncle resented it. But that was her attitude towards me. In other words, she would show me off, and I suspect in retrospect that she really liked me better than the other children. I was the first one, and she made, I think, more fuss over me than the others. But at the time, I would never have said that I'm her favorite, nor that any of us were her favorites. She was also unusually, very badly temperamental. She would have fit of temperament, during which she would declare that she never wanted to have any children. that she is taking care of us because it's her duty, and how much she hates it. And I remember thinking indignantly from as far back as I can recall that we did not choose to be born, and what is it that we are expected to do about it? That since we could not help it, under what sort of obligation should we consider ourselves? It's the injustice, the irrationality of that kind of accusations that I resented very much. And as far as I was concerned, I simply ignored it, in the sense that it didn't make me feel guilty, it made me feel resentful. My feeling about the family was only to wait for the time when I would grow up and get out of there. It isn't that I consider myself so unhappy, it's just that I had a very strong sense very early that anything that I liked had to be mine and not mother's and not the family's. Because my difference and my intellectuality always took the form of values. It would always be a succession of people, books, heroes in books, later movies, that became the symbol of this is my world and other things are not my world. 1914 was a big turning point in my life anyway. Mother subscribed for me to a boys' magazine, because it would be adventure stories. Now, I remember one illustration that impressed me was a picture of that Englishman you see standing at the wall with a sword or something waiting for someone. But this hero, and his name was Cyrus, was a perfect drawing of my present hero. Tall, long-legged, with kind of, trousers and leggings, the way soldiers wear, but no jacket, just an open-collared shirt torn in front, kind of open very low, sleeves rolled at the elbows, and hair falling down over one eye. Elements of my, at least the appearance of what is my bromide about my type of man, were completely taken from that illustration. The first time they're presented in the story is that they're all in a cage, and the cage is being wheeled through this valley to some kind of temple ceremony, and they're all scared except the hero. And I remember the image, the first illustration. He's standing holding on to the bars of the cage where everybody else is on the bottom, sitting down or cringing. Thereafter, up to the age of 12, that's the next 3 years, that was my exclusive love. It was almost mystical in this sense, that I felt I'm totally out of the concerns or the reality of anybody. What they're interested in doesn't matter at all to me, because I know something much higher. The next important highlight would be the summer of 1914, which is when we went to Europe. Switzerland, it's my idea of heaven. It was kind of a world of its own, both the country and the whole spirit of climbing the mountains and seeing something unusual. We were on our way from Switzerland to Paris when the war was declared. And from then on, that's the end of the world, which I didn't know at the time. I remember thinking I was enormously annoyed and hoped it will be over with quickly. Well, the original plan was to go to several countries, you see, predominantly Switzerland. And we were caught by the war in Europe. And that was a big problem because you couldn't come back. You see, Russia was cut off. So we had to go via the Scandinavian country over a mined sea. And the boat before us was exploded and the one after us. We got through. I thought it was, at the time, it didn't have full reality for me, but I knew that Mother was terribly worried, that something very serious was going on. Then the Russian Revolution was February 1917. Then the Communist Revolution was the so-called October Revolution. And that was in that same year, October 17. We left in the fall of 1918. By that time, there was a civil war going on in the south in the Ukraine. And there were so-called White Russian armies. We wanted to get out to escape communism, simply. And Father got a permit to travel on the ground that my sister, who had had pneumonia twice, needed to go to the Crimea. So that's how we managed to get out of Petrograd. Now that was in the fall of 1918, and we came back in 1921. By 21, the Civil War was over and the whole Russia was communist. I began to suddenly found myself, in effect, asking a lot of whys in an abstract manner, but beginning to define the reasons for what I believe. And then I realized that what I was now doing is thinking in principle. Today I would say it was the process of integration, really, but that I wouldn't have known then. I think it may not be irrelevant that was the year of the start of the revolution. The springboard for it was the fact that I was very much in sympathy with the February Revolution. Because, it was the bloodless revolution where everybody was for freedom and the whole atmosphere. So, though it was in a kind of a sentimental Russian way, nevertheless, it was all the glorification of freedom. In my terms, it was the individual. What today I would call the rights of the individual. Why the individual is right? Why is it right for him to be free? Why is the strong, independent man important? By what right can anybody tell a man what he should do or what he should live for? And of course, then when the October Revolution happened, that's when my first conviction began of a kind which I remember specifically concluding, the ones that I mentioned in the preface to the living, that nobody has the right to tell men to exist for the sake of the state. That the evil, which before that I would have called collectivism, although I wouldn't know the word, it would be the group, the herd, that kind of entity, now began to be statism, conscious. As far as I can account historically, that from as far back as I can remember, I was so busy mentally with my own concerns that I didn't develop any social instinct. In that sense, the idea of having friends was never my first concern. What I can't quite communicate is the unimportance that people in that social sense had for me. I decided at that time that I could never be in love with an ordinary man. In my last years in high school, when the girls were beginning to go out on dates, I remember feeling a very superior contempt. How can they be interested in just boys? I have to have a hero. From the earliest age, I had the impression, even before the revolution, that culture, civilization, anything which is interesting, as I would have put to me, is abroad. Now, I, in a general sort of sense, thought that I would probably be a writer in Russian. Therefore, I don't think I thought of settling abroad. But what it amounted to would be that I would probably live abroad, as many Russians in those days did. That in one way or another, what I would have considered my home would have been European culture. I didn't begin to even discover America till about the last years of high school. For the first time, incidentally, it was only in the last year of high school that they gave us a small course on American history. Before that, in all history courses, they gave you only Europe, Russian history, of course, and European. And it's in this particular high school in the South, when I graduated, they had one course on America. And to me, it was almost incredible. Before that, America was mentioned in geography books, but not as history. I didn't really know about the Declaration of Independence or what the American system is until the last year. And I'm not sure that I even would have grasped it all correctly. I would not have had a clear idea of capitalism or collectivism. All I knew is that that's the country of individualism.